Well, I'm Rose McGee, and I live right here in Golden Valley, Minnesota. I actually work at Minnesota Humanities Center, but my passion is the sweet potato comfort pie, which I'm founder of. Well, the sweet potato comfort pie got started when I was watching television, like many people in this country, the unrest that was happening in Ferguson, Missouri, and wondering what in the world can I do. I'm sitting there looking at this hopelessness on the faces of people who look like me. And something said, and as far as I'm concerned, it was the Lord speaking to me, going, make some pies and take them down. When something comes to me like this, and I'm like, wait a minute, seriously? And I went in the kitchen and I just sort of walked around in circles, trying to really examine this thing. And I finally said, all right, I'm going to do it. So I did, and a few weeks later, I packed about 30 sweet potato pies in the trunk of my car. My son happened to have been in town at the time, and I said, I'm going to go down to Ferguson. Do you want to go? And he didn't think I was serious about that, but I was, and he did. So I did. I packed up 30 pies, and off we went. But when I got there, it was really calm, very still, because the first round of protest was over and people were waiting to see if there was going to be an indictment or not. So most of the folk who were out on the streets where Michael Brown's makeshift memorial was were people like me who'd come from everywhere. But the folk who lived in Ferguson, for the most part, it wasn't a large number of them, but there was this one young lady, and she was standing there just fussing at the memorial site. Just, you shouldn't have been out that day. You should have been inside. And I went over to her. She was very young. And I asked her if she knew him. And she says, yeah, I've known him. We grew up together. And I asked her if she would like a sweet potato pie. And she looked at me like, a sweet potato pie. And that's really how she looked. I have a photograph of her looking at me like that. And I explained to her why I had brought pie and opened the box. And of course, the aroma came out, and it was a beautiful pie. And she was very eager to get it, and she took it and she started crying. A couple of days later, when I got back home, she sent an email to let me know how good the pie was and how much her family. But those are the kinds of experiences that we had throughout that journey. But coming back, I knew I had to do something at home because what I discovered in listening to people that I met in Ferguson, people just wanted to be heard and they wanted to be treated with respect. So, what do? How do we begin to get people to realize they just need to talk to each other and to grow in relationship with each other? And we came up with this weekend over Martin Luther King holiday. And so um, that's what we did. Since then, we've been making the pies every weekend. On Sunday, people come and have conversation about race, but they also talk about who they'd like to gift those pies to. And that's what we've been doing. That's what sweet potato comfort pie is about. And as I tell people, it's more than just a pretty pie. A pretty pie it is, and a delicious one too. But it's also about the conversations. It's about understanding. I tell people who ask, well, why sweet potato pies? Why are you doing sweet potato pies? Well, for me, it's the sacred dessert of black culture. And I grew up in the rural South. I grew up in Jackson, Tennessee. Well, it's a Southern thing. You always have sweet potato pie wherever you are, no matter. It's in the middle of the major events. It's just the way it is. So our organization, Sweet Potato Comfort Pie, a catalyst for caring and building community, and keeping in mind the history, the culture, as we go through this whole thing around race and just trying to establish relationships with people. That incident with the murder of Mr. George Floyd in May, I'll never forget the image. And of course, this has been happening. It's been happening for centuries. But to witness it the manner in which we did, it just it was definitely the tip of the iceberg for people, as you have witnessed. There have been uprisings all over the world. People have been sitting on this. It's been there. So I grew up again in the South during a time of segregation. And we went through a period where black kids didn't go to school because school was out for us to help the farming. And it used to be really challenging to watch the white kids go by on school buses, and we're out working in fields and doing things like that. But it gave me this perspective that I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. And I'm going to get an education. I'm going to get an education. But when I discovered that I still wasn't given the same kind of opportunities, there were still only things that I could do that I could not do, that I wasn't allowed to do because of being black. And that was very painful because you get it in your mind somewhere that, all right, I've got an education, I've got a degree now, so therefore I can go wherever I want to go. I can do whatever I want to do. That was not the case. For our children, we do have to remain hopeful. For our children, we do have to help them to understand that they too are entitled to this life. It is not right that our children should feel that they cannot live. And that's the challenge that we have. Mr. George Floyd had children, and he had a life, and he deserved to live it. So that's how I feel about it. I'm deeply saddened and deeply troubled. And I just want people to stop the hatred, stop this thing of evil, as far as I'm concerned, that runs rampant among certain people. For what? What is that about? What is the fear? What is the rationale for control? This whole world is big enough for all of us to partake in one big pie.